Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 295. We got a great guest on the show. We're going to be discussing content marketing, how to hire a quality writer to help you with your content for your website, how that can help you get more traffic to your website and produce a much more successful online business, a membership site, whatever you want to do. And our guest is Brenda Barron from Digital Inkwell. Thanks for coming on the show, Brenda.
Thanks so much for having me.
She's a little bit nervous, but I told her I don't bite. Can you give us a quick outline of you, Brenda, and a bit about Digital Inkwell?
Sure. I started freelance writing when I was in college, and I wrote for magazines then. And most parenting, pregnancy, cats are things that I wrote about back then. But around, I want to say 2013 or so, I transitioned into writing about WordPress. And I had used WordPress before then. So, it was just one of those situations where I applied for a gig writing about WordPress and, one thing led to another, and here we are. But in between then, I started writing for Managed WP and WPMU, and I've written for most of the top WordPress blogs. And since then, I've developed a writing team and tackle content for a variety of websites.
Sounds good to me. Before we really delve into the interview, folks, I want to tell you about our sponsor. And for this show, it's Lifter LMS. And what is Lifter LMS? It's a great plugin if you're into membership websites and you want to build out your membership site to a higher level. You need a learning management system, and Lifter's one of the best WordPress plugins to do that. We use it ourselves with client websites. I'm a great fan of Chris and Thomas, the joint founders of Lifter LMS. They're both great guys. So I would highly recommend their plugin if you're looking to put your membership site on steroids. You find they're offering a 15% discount on all the paid add-ons. Lifter LMS, the core product, is totally free, but they have a number of plug-in add-ons. And if you go to the WP-Tonic website and look at the show notes that will be supporting this show, there will be a link and a coupon code which will get you 15% off any of these add-ons. So it's a great offer. So go to the website, get that coupon, and try Lifter and some of their add-ons. Back to Brenda. So how do you see content, developing content for websites? Developing in 2018. What trends are you seeing actually, Brenda?
One of the biggest trends I've been seeing, and it's not just this year, last year I really started to see it pick up, was the length of content is getting longer. People are focusing more on creating like all-encompassing, the ultimate guide to whatever you're writing about or what you want to cover. And I think, that's largely because of Google, and it's doesn't prioritize, little 600-word articles anymore. And like long tail keywords still work to some degree, but the biggest focus is really trying to be competitive for, your big, highly competitive keywords. And to do that, it's creating huge guides to a topic. And a lot of that also is well-researched, and then trying to get a lot of links back to it from other high-quality websites. What I've noticed is shortcuts don't work anymore. You have to put in the effort to make good content. You can't cheat your way around it. You have to write good stuff, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree that, you know, with that trend. But can you give some guidance about, you know, how, you know, we're all on a budget, you know, it's just reality, you know, we're all struggling, you know, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are either have their own online business in some sector, it's membership focus, or they're a word in the WordPress community themselves as developers, designers, writers. We have a very broad audience, but they're all in business. So what's a realistic, you know, what's a realistic plan to try and promote your site? I know this is a very broad question, but hopefully you go with me. You know, how much content should you think about producing? I know you could say as much as possible, but can you give some kind of guidance?
Sure. I think a lot of the time, I think there's pressure to consistently produce a lot of content, but that's not always what you need to do. Like I was saying, I think focusing on making a really meaty, interesting, well-researched guide is more important than getting a new article out every week even. If you turned out like 2 in-depth guides a month, that would be plenty. And then you focus the rest of your effort on sharing it with people and getting other high-quality websites to link to it. That's the biggest strategy I've been seeing. And I think a lot of, you know, like you said, businesses are on a budget, but I think it's manageable when you're not like succumbing to the pressure to produce a new article every day. You're instead taking, you know, your content marketing budget that you would spend on, you know, having 3 blog posts a week or something, and stretching it out over an entire month into 2 bigger articles. I think it's cost-wise, it's comparable. And I think that makes it more manageable. When you say, oh, you need to write the ultimate guide to something, that sounds really intimidating. And like, oh, that's going to cost a lot of money. But not necessarily when you factor in what you would have been spending on many smaller pieces of content.
About the link building side of it, I get a lot of people approach WP-Tonic to share. They're mostly totally out the blue. They're people that I really, you know nothing about. And very rarely do I click on the links that they're providing to info, graphics or whatever.
I get them too.
I'll bet you do. Have you got any insights or based on your experience on outreach that can be a little bit more successful, or is it really just a numbers game?
I think it's quality over quantity. So getting a link at a really, you know, high domain authority site would be better than many smaller sites. But I get a lot, like I said, I get a lot of emails like that too, requesting a link back to their content and stuff. And sometimes I check it out if it seems interesting. But yeah, it can kind of just feel like one in a crowd. And so I don't know that that's the best way to draw attention to your content unless
let's reframe the question a little bit. Sorry to interrupt, Brenda.
No, it's fine.
What outreach works with you?
Oh yeah. I was on the earlier point, I was just going to say that it could be a numbers game. Like if you blasted that out to a lot of people, a few might stick and you could get some links that way, sure. But I think what has worked for me is just like the long haul, to be honest. Taking the time, building up authority in a niche, building links organically, writing good content that people want to read and that they link to. And then when I have new clients and building new relationships with people, you know, I might suggest that they check out something, you know, but I think it has to be within the framework of a relationship you have already. The cold call element to it, like I said, it's just it's so impersonal, and I don't think that's necessarily effective. I think you have to leverage the resources you have, the people you know, and use that network to expand the reach of your content rather than trying to just toss it out in the world, you know?
I've, reflecting back, another thing is that if they personalise it a bit, and I don't think my ego is too big, actually, Brenda. Maybe some other people would disagree, but I think I'm reasonably down to earth. Some way. Ask Kim, my co-host. Maybe that's why she's not here this week. Let's get back on subject, Jonathan. So if they kind of personalise the outreach, like they've shown some interest, I don't know why this works. If they kind of said, you know, I've listened to this podcast, and they throw in something, so it's obvious they have listened to the podcast, or they've gone to the YouTube channel and they've watched something. It's obvious, and they've put something in it, so it's obvious they have watched it. And then they say, well, it was really interesting. I saw the post that you did support it, but we just got this extra content. Because I think that's more effective. What do you reckon, Brenda?
I agree. I think when I said that it can be impersonal, you know, I have received requests like to check out an infographic or an article or something that is directly related to something that I have written, and it's obvious that they read it, and it has a more personal touch, and those are the emails I usually, you know, click through and read and consider linking to if I have the authority to. A lot of the time, in my case, the problem is they're asking for a link on a site, a client's site that I write for or manage, and I don't have the authority to insert links on those sites, and so it's like, sorry. But in cases where I do, if it's more personal, I'll usually check it out. But then there's the cases where people try to make it look like it's personal, and then they just like have like the boilerplate, obviously copy paste the title of your article here, and I don't necessarily check that out, you know.
No, I don't think that really, like I say, that's the numbers game.
Yeah.
So when it comes to articles having external links, do you think it's a kind of bit of an SEO question, and I'm not sure if you want to tackle this, but it's content marketing and content production with SEO all intertwined now, really, aren't they? But do you think an article that has a lot of external links to relevant resources with good authority helps the article in general anyway on somebody's website?
I think it does, and even linking to high authority sites is good for SEO, you know. But I think even outside of that, it's good because it shows that you did your research and that you are familiar with the leaders in, you know, your industry, and that you're aware of the top content of the moment. And I think it just keeps you in the loop, shows that you are in the loop, and that long term is more important, I think, than any kind of like little SEO trick, you know. But it is helpful for SEO. But
are there any other things that you would like to put in front of the audience and listeners around how to prepare their articles after they've toiled away writing these ultimate guides?
I'd say make it easy to navigate for the reader. So have some kind of table of contents up top if it's really lengthy. You know, the usual suspects in terms of the checklist you're supposed to follow. Have lots of images, you know, break it up with lists. Just make it user-friendly, easy to read. Don't just have giant paragraphs, you know, where people are scrolling, and they're just overwhelmed with text. You know, break it up, make it visually pleasing. It's interesting. All these things are very interconnected, you know, design, writing, SEO, marketing, it's all very connected. And I think you need to have all of those elements in order for it to really be effective in the long run.
That's great. We're going to go for our break, folks. But when we come back, we're going to be discussing with Brenda, how do you hire a really good quality writer? What are the expectations from a writer? What is a good fit? based on Brenda's experience, what is the best formula between the owner of the website and a writer like Brenda to get the kind of results that both are looking for? That's what we're going to be discussing when we come back, folks. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. I've interrogated Brenda. She's not coping at all. No, I think we've had a good discussion so far. It goes quick, doesn't it? 15 minutes, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, it might have been an eternity for you, but it was quick.
No, it's quick.
So, this delve back into the before the break, and then we delve into about hiring an effective writer. So, like, based on our previous discussion, we seem to be in a kind of arms race when it comes to the length of articles. Do you think also putting video into articles or other multimedia elements is a great idea as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, that plays into what we were talking about before, and that's breaking up the text, making it visually pleasing, user-friendly. Adding video is a great way to not only break up the text, but further engage people, something else for them to interact with. So anything like that, multimedia is a great addition, I think.
The other factor, is in my mind, I've got an assumption how you're going to answer this question already, but I'm going to wipe it out of my mind. If you almost do almost any search on any kind of WordPress term that's got any kind of traffic number, it seems to be dominated by half a dozen players in the WordPress ecosystem. They're on, literally one of their articles is going to come up either in 1, 2, or 3 of organic search. Would you agree with that statement? And secondly, if you're one of the smaller players, are there any tips or insights that you can give that people can get a result to overcome what I've just stated, really?
I think that is a fair assessment. That is definitely true. And it can be really intimidating if you're small starting out, because WordPress is kind of a crowded space. But I think spending time if you haven't launched anything, I think that's the time to really think about how you're different. So it's about looking at what is out there at the moment and asking yourself, what can I provide that hasn't been provided yet? And filling in gaps. So some of this is keyword research too. So, going broad and narrow and going more narrow with your keyword search. So let's say, I don't know, WordPress design, let's say you want to target.
That's not a competitive race, is it, Brenda?
I was trying to think of something very, very broad. Yeah. Of course, that's super competitive, but this is where your long tail keywords are helpful, and you try and build authority on the edges, and over time it's a long game situation. Like I was saying before, there's no shortcuts. So it's a combination of long tail and making your ultimate guides and your outreach and coming up with a way to differentiate yourself. Like I've worked with many people, and the people who succeed are the ones that put in that investment of time at the beginning and coming up with something that makes them different and a real key selling point. It's like basic business ideas here, but there's long gone are the days where you can just throw up a website and do some quick keyword research and expect to rank. Like, that's just not going to happen anymore. You have to really think about your end goal, I guess.
I've got two responses to that, really. You hinted at the beginning of our conversation that you had some doubts about long tail. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I think it's mostly using that as a sole strategy. I mean, that a while ago, a few years ago, that was like the be all end all, you know, forget the highly competitive terms, target the long tail, and you'll, dominate in all those little nooks and crannies, basically. And I think that can still work, but it's just not as effective as it used to be. And in order to really see your rank increase, you have to do some long tail in combination with targeting those higher, more competitive keywords,
Yeah.
making the ultimate guides. And the ultimate guides are naturally going to have all those long tail keywords in them anyway. So it's about relevancy, more than any short-term strategy. Relevant content to your niche.
That sounds great. Got any tips? Because I think I've come to the conclusion I've been highly influenced, and I would still say by Brian Jackson, the marketing director of Kinster Hosting, who's a sponsor of the show. But he's a great writer and also a great SEO expert as well. But he writes fantastic articles for Kinster, and he put me on to some tools. And I see kind of SEO research as a kind of mixture of science and art, really. When you're doing your own keyword research, what got any insights to that, and maybe what tools you're using?
Sure. You're right. It is, sometimes it just feels like you have no idea what you're doing. Like that's, I think that's a feeling you have to just kind of accept and get used to.
Well, what I mean by that, Brenda, is that there's some people that put forward that there's a definite mythology, and if you follow that mythology, you will get a guaranteed outcome. My observation of SEO is you've got to have experience, and there's a bit. It is data driven to some extent, but it's also a bit of a based on experience and gut.
I think you're right. I mean, yeah, it is data driven, but ultimately what you choose to target, what you choose to write about based on that data, and what keywords you choose to move forward with is gut. It's like, what do I think will resonate with my audience? What do I think will work? So I agree with you on that 100%. Tools I use, I actually use Moz. I also use, I found this tool a while ago, and it's really simple. It's just called Keyword Finder. And
that's what I use.
Oh yeah, it's like, what I like is that it's pretty straightforward. Like a lot of the time you can get very mired in options, and there's plenty of options in it, but you can just, like, it's a straightforward view when you input a keyword. It's not just like, here's all the information in the world. It's just straightforward, and I like
some
that.
some of these really powerful SEO tools like Rush, Majestic, Raven. There's a couple others. They're pretty intimidating and pretty powerful, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. I like something a little more just straightforward.
You need an ultimate guide just to learn how to use them, really, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Yes, ultimate guide for using your SEO tool. So if you're looking to hire a professional writer, there's a lot of people out there that say they're writer, but I've come across a lot of them, and they're very good writers when it comes to print brochures, but they're definitely no good at writing content for websites. I've got any insights about the hiring process when it comes to hiring somebody to help you with your content production?
Yeah, I think real key is knowing what you want before you post a job ad. So what are they going to be writing about? What experience level are you looking for? What knowledge do they need to be bringing to the table? Do they need to be familiar with certain tools? Are you going to expect them to input things in WordPress? Do you need to lay all that out in your job ad up front save yourself a lot of headache later sorting through applications with people that just missed the mark because you didn't make it clear what the mark was. I think that's a big step to making the process easier for yourself. Also, having a clear budget in mind, having also a long-term goals for the writer. So, that could be vague, like just that you want to work with them ongoing could be a goal. But if it's a short-term project, lay that out. Long-term, lay that out. Be clear would be my biggest tip for hiring a writer.
Confusion is not a good bedfellow, is it?
No, not at all.
All right, you. I think we're going to wrap it up for the podcast part of the show, folks. Brenda's been generous and agreed to stay on, and we can continue the discussion, which you'll be able to see on the WP-Tonic website and also on our YouTube channel. But definitely go to the WP-Tonic website. We've got a ton of great articles on there about membership, learning management systems, and a little bit about security and WordPress in general. Brenda, how can people get hold of you? What's the best methods of finding out what you're up to and the latest things you're interested in general?
I'm sure. They can visit my website at thedigitalinkwell.com. They can follow me on Twitter at digitalinkwell, and pretty much Digital Inkwell everywhere on all the social medias. So
domination. Well, that's great. Like I say, folks, you'll find the full transcription of our interview with Brenda and the links we discussed in those notes. If you really want to support the show, folks, there's two ways you can do that. You could go to iTunes and leave us a review. It really does help the show. For some, good, bad, or indifferent, I really don't care. You could also Twitter out about the show, give us feedback. I love feedback. I'm not just producing this show just for my own vanity. I want to provide some value to our listeners, and our listeners are growing, and you've been extremely loyal as well, listeners and viewers. That's great. So if you could do those two things, and maybe go to the website and leave some comments about our discussion with Brenda, I think it's been fantastic. I just wanted to provide some insight about content production and about hiring a writer, which we're going to discuss in a bit more detail in the bonus content. Also, you can join us on Fridays where we do our live roundtable show. It's always rather punchy and opinionated, and we've got a great panel of WordPress junkies and online experts, and we don't mince our words, and we rapidly go through a list of the most interesting stories of the week around WordPress and the internet in general. And you can join us on that show live on the WP-Tonic Facebook page, and we do that at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Friday. So if you want to end a week to observe really intelligent or semi-intelligent conversation, I'm not too sure about me, go there. So we're going to wrap up the show, folks, and we'll see you next week. Bye. So what are some good ways of finding a good writer? I would imagine that, I did a bit of outreach with you because I've been reading some of your articles, and that's another thing. What's the kind of I'm struggling for the right word now. Industry etiquette around, some articles have you as the writer, and some are probably, I'm presuming that you write, they don't have your by name and that. What is the kind of etiquette around that, actually, Brenda?
It's just usually something that's laid out up front. So if someone's looking for a ghostwriter, they would say they want a ghostwriter. If it's a byline position, it would say that, or it should be clear up front. It usually doesn't matter to me very much. Like it's all the same work process.
Yeah.
either way. Um,
But you get
but yeah,
some
I think,
credit. You get some credit and some business
oh yeah,
promotion from it, don't you?
yes, absolutely. With a byline, you do get a little bio and your little pictures next to it and everything, which is great. And sometimes a link to your website, which is I've received a lot of work from those bylines. But yeah, it should just be something that's laid out up front. A lot of the time, when people are looking for ghostwriters, sometimes the pay rate is a little higher, but that's not always the case. It just depends, in my experience.
And what have been some of your best experiences in working for individuals? What on reflection, what have been some of the leading indication that it's going to be a good working relationship, apart from being paid on time?
Well, that's a big one. That is a big one. Um, clear expectations, clear communication. If I have a question, it's answered, within a day or so.
You don't hear whispering grass.
Right. I think the biggest frustration that I've run into is a client that's very, very eager to get started, and then I start and have one question and it takes them like a week to get back to me. And then I'm still working with the same deadline they gave me,
Yes, they want their article tomorrow.
Yeah. So, I think that's the biggest frustration. Signs that things are going well, or that it's a good relationship, is everyone doing what they said they were going to do at the outset, everyone holding up their side of it, providing the information that they want in an article. If they have a specific outline they want me to follow, providing that right away, not waiting for me to draft something and then, oh, by the way, this is what I actually wanted it to be like. Clear scope. Also, scope creep is a big problem in web design and stuff, but it happens in content as well. Make this little change, please make this change. Suddenly an article that, I was billing for 1,000 words is now 1,500 words.
Yeah.
And they just got 500 words of free work, like that can be a big problem. So clarity and communication, doing what you said you were going to do.
Well, they're under pressure as well, to be honest, aren't they?
Yeah.
We've got to be adult here. They're trying to get the best value from you.
Oh, yeah.
And Google's whipping the whip, aren't they?
I get it. I absolutely get it.
But there's only so many hours in the day, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
So you said you developed a team that helps you. How long did that take for you to decide you're going to develop your team, and what have you learned from that process, Brenda?
I was getting a lot of client inquiries, and it was more than I could handle myself. So it was just a natural part of business growth, which is always positive. But I knew a few writers already, reached out to them, see if they could handle some things. Or handle some assignments. After it grew more, I posted a job ad actually on Pro Bloggers. It was a great job board, and got some applications. It's been interesting being on both sides of it.
I bet it has.
Being hired and hiring writers. It's made me really try to be good to my writers. Things that I've experienced, I don't like negative things I don't want to inflict on them, so it's been very educational.
That's very diplomatic.
It has though. I think they
it's like, I'm not trying to be funny here, but it's the same, around all freelancing has been reliability and not just disappearing off the face of the earth being a certain problem.
Yes. I think I've experienced that from clients, and I've experienced that from writers as well, and if I'm the middle person and I'm trying to meet a client's deadline, I need the writer to meet their deadline. It's, any kind of management woes, you know. But yeah, I think some of that can be mitigated just by being clear. And if people aren't holding up their side of things, you know, trying to figure out if there's something you can do to help facilitate making things easier. And if not, then you might have to part ways, and that stinks, but you know, it's a part of it.
But on the other hand, I don't know where this arms race is going to end up. You know, there doesn't seem to be any end point, doesn't it? You know, obviously saying, but in some ways there has to be. Or are we looking in 2 to 3 years' time that to get a result, you're looking at a 5,000 word article?
I have no idea. I mean, I think that's a good point. Right now, it's just like the longer the better, but like, what does that mean realistically in the long term? It's hard to say. We'll see what the next.
Sorry to interrupt, Brenda. I would have thought there has to be a kind of scene in place, doesn't it? Because you know, otherwise the article, when it gets to a certain, you know, long form, it has its place, doesn't it? If you're really, really, really passionate about the subject, or it's just filled with information and that, I don't know. It's a difficult one, isn't it? You know, so just to kind of recap, I think what I got from this conversation really is that you got it's long term, it's medium and long term. If you really think you're going to get a result from content marketing, you've got to do some keyword research. Either you're right, the person you're hiring might be able to do some for that, or you've got to do it yourself. And then you've got to have a discussion with the writer, because like we discussed, it's more art. It's a kind of mixture of art and science, or science and art, really. And you've got to do your due diligence, because like I said, there's a lot of people that out there that say they can write for the web, but they're not very good, are they?
Right. I think that's a good summation. Yeah, I think it's just important to make sure the person you hire can do what they say they can do. And that can be mitigated sometimes by doing a test article. Like if I'm hiring a new writer, I'll do a paid test assignment with them to see how they would tackle something. And I think that's really important before you jump all in with someone. But as a writer, please don't expect people to write a free test article. That's just the most annoying thing in the world.
Well, I think that's a bad sign, really, isn't it? Like somebody do my design for nothing, or do my website, you know.
I can't even count how many times though I've seen that in job ads, like an expectation to do a free test article. It's ridiculous.
Right, Brenda, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a blast. I think we've given some insight around, because it's not something I've heard that much on other podcasts. When I've having a professional web writer like yourself, I would highly recommend folks, Brenda, to you. I've observed her work online, and it's always really high quality, and she knows what she's talking about. So I would give a personal recommendation to Brenda. And we'll see you next week, folks, where we'll have somebody doing something really great with WordPress or online in general. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.